No, I just finished shooting the video about Bill 9. I hope those people pay attention. Maui's gone stone cold crazy, and I think a lot of people are going to lose a lot of money, but we'll see what happens. Should be interesting. Get your popcorn ready. Maui just traded its housing crisis for a housing and economic crisis. Let's talk about Bill 9 that just passed on Maui. A lot of people are celebrating it, and honestly, I think they're going to end up being very, very disappointed in the end. Maui just passed a bill there. It's going to eliminate thousands of existing short-term vacation rental units, and these were not units that were operating illegally. These are units that were operating completely within the law that Maui had set, and Maui has simply taken away the rights of the owners to use their property as they see fit. These are not new construction units. This isn't speculative housing. These are properties that were bought under a set of rules, and now they've decided to change those rules. I want to be very clear up front. This isn't about whether or not you like vacation rentals. This is about bad policy, bad math, and emotional decision making that's really going to backfire on Maui in ways that a lot of people are just not ready for. Let's talk about what Bill 9 actually does. At a high level, Bill 9 reduces the number of short-term rentals in apartment-zoned areas on Maui. The argument used to justify it sounds pretty simple. If we eliminate vacation rentals, these units will become long-term rentals, and that will make housing more affordable. The idea is very emotionally appealing, but it's also mostly wrong. And that matters because once you strip away the emotion, the policy does not do what it says it will do. Let's talk about why this passed. This wasn't driven by a majority of property owners. It wasn't driven by people who actually own or manage housing in any way. This was driven by a very vocal minority, amplified on social media, public testimony, and with political pressure. This is a small group of people that show up to every single meeting, every single hearing, and at every single microphone. Most of the people who own property, well, they're busy working. Most residents, they don't have the time to sit for 5 hours on a Tuesday afternoon waiting in line to offer public testimony. The people who do are people who are not part of the economy. So what happens? Decision makers listen to the loudest voices and not the most representative voices. The system is completely flawed, and it's something that we see on all of the Hawaii Islands. After the Lahaina firestorm and years of housing frustration, Bill 9 has become a convenient solution to the housing villain. It feels decisive, it feels moral, and it feels like action, but it's what's called action bias. The idea that you have to do something, and doing anything is better than doing nothing, even if the thing that you're doing is actually destructive. Feeling good and working well are just not the same thing. There's a core flaw in the logic, and here's the central claim behind Bill 9. These short-term rentals will become long-term housing. That assumption sounds reasonable, but it's also directly contradicted by the data. A comprehensive study by the Hawaii County Council and conducted by Hutton Partners looked at this exact question over here on the Big Island. Not hypotheticals, actual owner behavior studied directly. If short-term rentals were reduced or eliminated, only 4% of respondents said they would convert to long-term rentals. 68% said they would definitely not convert to long-term rentals, and about 19% said they weren't quite sure. There was also another 9% that marked as other, and the study said that these are mostly people who would just choose to sell instead. This means that an overwhelming number of owners would not convert to long-term rentals. 4%. That's what we're talking about here. So when these policymakers say that these are going to turn into long-term rentals, the truth is that the data says quite the opposite. Now, let's also talk about who actually owns these properties, because that actually matters. According to this study, more than 75% of the short-term rental owners operate just one unit. This isn't a large company on the mainland who owns dozens and dozens of units. These are single owner units, often using these to supplement their income to allow them to stay on the island part-time. It turns out only 20% of owners classify their property as a pure investment. 54% rely on the short-term rentals to cover the housing costs. When you remove that income, you're not squeezing Wall Street. You're actually just squeezing individual owners, many of whom are local or part-time residents who are trying to hold on to property here in Hawaii. And when they can't hold, I think they're probably going to sell. Here's another inconvenient detail. Many of your short-term housing units, they're just not suitable for long-term housing. There are a lot of studio and one-bedroom apartments that are set up really for hotel stays. These aren't necessarily set up for someone who has a family with a couple of kids. They have often overly restrictive HOA rules. They're often in resort areas with very expensive HOA and resort fees. So the idea that somehow these are suddenly going to just be cheaper doesn't really even look at the data in terms of individual units either. There's also an economic side of this that has been largely ignored. On the Big Island alone, that study estimates that short-term rentals generate approximately $710 million per year in lodging revenues. Visitors staying at short-term vacation rentals spend an additional $565 to $862 million outside of lodging. That's food, transportation, shopping, and activities. I'll also mention that a lot of your short-term vacation rental users do more things in the community and spread the money around, where people who stay at hotels often stay at the hotel and only spend their money there, not putting money into the local economy. Here's the part that Maui didn't pay attention to either. According to that report, 24% of visitors who stay in short-term rentals said they would not come at all if short-term vacation rentals were not available to them. That's lost tax revenue, that's lost economic impact throughout the entire island. That means fewer jobs and fewer opportunities for the people who live and work here. So when you hear the argument that banning short-term rentals is a magic bullet to immediately solve the housing crisis, understand what the data actually says. Most people will not convert. Most people are not investors, and most of the economic activity will not get replaced. You don't get more housing, you get less certainty, less revenue, and a lot more of unintended consequences. There's economic consequences that I think people are ignoring. Vacation rentals do not exist in a vacuum. They support cleaners and property managers and home inspectors and handymen and landscapers and photographers, all kinds of small, locally owned businesses. Eliminating thousands of units doesn't just hit the owners, it hits all these people that are stakeholders in the tourism industry. Less transient accommodation tax, less general excise tax, less spending by visitors in our community. This isn't theoretical either. When you remove an economic engine, the ripples are guaranteed to follow. Now, this also sets a very dangerous precedent. Here's the part that should make every property owner in Maui very nervous. Bill 9 didn't target bad actors. It didn't target illegal rentals. It changed the rules after the fact. Once a county shows that it is willing to retroactively strip value and strip rights from a legal property, people notice. Lenders notice, and insurance companies notice, buyers notice, people who invest in small businesses notice. And that doesn't lower housing costs. What it does is it increases the risk on anything. And risk means expense. Now, here's my message to people who own short-term rentals on Maui, whether you were directly impacted by this Bill 9 or not. The regulatory market in Maui has shifted. It's time to get brutally honest with yourself. The political appetite for more restrictions is not gone. They're not going to stop at this. They're not satisfied with this outcome. And hope is not a strategy. For many owners, I think the smartest move is not going to wait around and see what happens next. It's planning your exit while you still have liquidity. And that's something I think every short-term owner on Maui needs to start considering right now. I've talked to a number of people who work in the Maui market, and they are talking about losses in value of hundreds of thousands of dollars since this even started. And that was before this passed. I think here on the Big Island, we have a pretty logical alternative. I think a lot of people are going to be hesitant to going to somewhere like Kauai that has a lot of restrictions as well. I think the lifestyle on Oahu is probably not as desirable for a lot of people, but I think the Big Island might fit in pretty well. It's a lot less expensive, and it's a little bit of old Hawaii that I think a lot of people are still looking for. Short-term rentals here on the Big Island are definitely more geographically dispersed. There's more land, there's less density pressure, and far less political momentum for blanket bans across the board of legal operating rentals. I want to be clear, you still have risk. This is still Hawaii. Regulation is always going to be part of the deal here. But the Big Island offers something that Maui is losing, and that's predictability. We have a much lower acquisition cost. We have much more flexible zonings. We have opportunities in resort nodes and permitted STVR zones. And that's why you're probably going to see an investor shift happening almost immediately. So Bill 9 may feel good to some, but the policies built on frustration instead of math tend to disappoint everyone later on in the end. If you own property on Maui, you probably need to reassess your risk exposure at this point. And if you're looking at redeploying your capital elsewhere in Hawaii, I think the Big Island really deserves a serious look. Now, if you want to talk about options and timelines and strategies, bonus depreciation, 1031 exchanges, that's literally what I do, helping buyers and sellers every single day, and I've been doing it for over 20 years. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you did, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the subscribe button. I have literally hundreds of amazing properties that you can view on my channel, and if you are a Maui owner, I think you'll see that our prices are pretty darn good when you compare them to Maui. Now, not every property that I have is going to be a short-term vacation rental, but I am a local expert and I can guide you to exactly where you want to go, getting the outcome you want based on my market knowledge and my deep knowledge of the short-term vacation rental market out here. When we had some legislation which was not nearly as bad back in 2018, I was actually chairing our government affairs committee at the time, so I know the rules very intimately, and I can definitely guide you to the outcome you want. Thanks a lot. Aloha.